It was a quiet Wednesday afternoon. The school bell had just rung, and students poured out of the building. Some laughed, some ran to their parents' cars, and some just walked slowly, tired after a long day. Among them was Tyrell, a 15-year-old black teenager with calm eyes and a quiet nature. Tyrell didn't talk much. He wasn't the loud type. He loved to draw in his notebook, listen to music, and stay out of trouble. His mother had raised him to be polite and respectful. That day, Tyrell was standing near the bus stop, his backpack over one shoulder, a sketch pad in his hand, and headphones in his ears. He had just finished a free art class after school. He was proud of the drawing he made, an eagle flying over a city. He looked at the road. No bus yet. So he waited. But something strange happened. A police car slowly rolled down the street. Inside were two officers, both white, both looking serious. They drove past Tyrell once, then turned around and came back. Tyrell noticed them. He felt a small knot form in his stomach. He tried not to make eye contact. The car stopped. The window rolled down. "You kid," one officer called out. "What are you doing here?" Tyrell pulled down his headphones. "Just waiting for the bus, sir." The other officer stepped out. "You sure about that?" Tyrell nodded. "Yes, sir. Just had an art class." The officers looked at each other. Then one of them pointed at his backpack. "Mind if we take a look inside that bag?" Tyrell blinked. "Why?" "You fit the description," the officer said coldly. Tyrell felt his heart beat faster. "What description?" "Teen male. Hoodie. Backpack. Seen walking near a broken window. You match." "I've been in class," Tyrell replied. He pulled out a folded paper. "Here's my permission slip." The officer didn't even read it. He grabbed the bag. Tyrell held it tighter. "Please, I haven't done anything." People started noticing. A few students across the street stopped walking. A woman sitting in her car took out her phone. The first officer pulled Tyrell's bag away. The second grabbed his arm. "Hey, that hurts!" Tyrell cried. They pushed him to the ground. His sketch pad flew out, pages scattering in the wind. The woman with the phone started recording. "Leave that boy alone," she shouted. Tyrell was now face down on the sidewalk, one officer pressing his knee on his back. Tears filled his eyes, not just from pain, but from fear. "I didn't do anything," he whispered. Then he said something that made the officers pause. "You don't know who my uncle is." The officer laughed. "Oh yeah? Who's your uncle?" "The mayor." Tyrell said nothing else, but his phone, lying nearby on the ground, lit up with a message. "Uncle Marlon calling." One of the officers looked at the screen and scoffed. "Cute. He got an uncle named Marlon." The woman with the camera zoomed in. She gasped. "Wait," she said softly. "Did he say Marlon?" The name sounded familiar. She opened her phone and searched. Her eyes went wide. Colonel Marlon Davis, a highly respected military officer, Special Forces, worked with the Pentagon, known for leading missions overseas and training elite teams in threat response. And he had one weakness: his family. Back at the station, Tyrell sat in silence. His face still hurt. His drawings were torn. He stared at the wall and wondered, what did I do wrong? He thought about his mom. She always told him, keep your head down, be polite, stay out of trouble. He did everything right. But still, it wasn't enough. The door to the holding room opened. A young officer stepped in. "You're free to go," he said. "Someone's here for you." Tyrell stood up slowly. When he stepped into the hallway, he froze. There, standing tall in a sharp black coat, was a man with eyes like fire. Colonel Marlon Davis, his uncle. Marlon looked at Tyrell, then at the officers. No words, just silence. And in that silence, everyone knew things were about to change. Tyrell's heart was still pounding as he followed his uncle out of the police station. People stopped and stared. They whispered, "That's Colonel Marlon Davis." Some nodded respectfully. Others looked surprised. Tyrell felt a mix of pride and fear. His uncle was a hero, a man who had fought in wars, trained soldiers, and protected the country. But here he was, standing beside a scared teenager who had just been treated like a criminal. Marlon's voice was calm but strong. Tell me everything, Tyrell. Tyrell took a deep breath. I was just waiting for the bus after my art class. The police came and said I looked suspicious. They said I matched a description, but I didn't. I showed them my papers, but they didn't listen. They pushed me to the ground and searched my bag. They called me names. It hurt. Marlon's jaw tightened. Did they hurt you badly? Tyrell nodded slowly. My arm still hurts. Marlon looked at the officers who had been watching quietly. You did this to my nephew? Without proof. Without respect. The officers shifted uncomfortably. Marlon turned to them and said, You have no right to treat a child this way, especially not a child of this city. Words spread fast. News cameras appeared outside the station. Reporters asked questions. People demanded answers. Marlon held a press conference. He stood beside Tyrell, proud and fierce. No child in our city should ever feel unsafe, he said. We must do better. We will do better. Tyrell's story touched hearts. People started sharing their own experiences. The city began to see the problem. How innocent kids were judged by their skin color, by their clothes, by fear instead of facts. But not everyone was happy. Some people wanted to quiet Tyrell and his uncle. They sent threatening messages. They whispered in dark rooms. Marlon did not back down. He promised to protect his family and to fight for justice. Tyrell looked up at his uncle one day and said, I'm scared. Marlon smiled softly. That's okay. Being scared means you care. But fear will never stop us from standing up for what is right. And with those words, a new chapter began. The fight for truth. The fight for respect. The fight that would change everything. After the press conference, Tyrell's story spread like wildfire. Videos of him standing tall next to Colonel Marlon Davis were everywhere, on TV, on phones, and on social media. People from all over the city began to talk about what had happened. Some sent messages of support to Tyrell and his uncle. Others joined protests, calling for changes in how the police treated young black teens. But while the city was watching, Marlon was also facing a battle of his own. Late one evening, as the city lights flickered outside his home, Marlon sat alone, looking at old photos and letters from his military days. He remembered missions that were never talked about in public, missions that were hard, dangerous, and full of secrets. His work had taught him to stay calm under pressure. But now, the pressure was different. It was about protecting his family and making sure justice was done, not just for Tyrell, but for every kid who felt afraid to walk outside. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. It was a message from someone anonymous. Stop this fight, or your family's secrets won't stay secret. Marlon's hands clenched the phone tightly. He knew what they meant. There were parts of his past that could ruin everything, his career, his reputation, and the trust his family had. But he also knew something else. The truth was stronger than fear. The next morning, Marlon met with Tyrell. Some people want us to be quiet, Marlon said quietly. But we won't. We have to be brave. Tyrell nodded. I want to help. I want to make sure this never happens again. Together, they planned to tell their story fully and openly. Because sometimes, courage means showing your scars. Because sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones fought in the light. And as the city watched, Marlon and Tyrell prepared for the fight ahead. The next day, the city was buzzing with questions. The story of Tyrell and Colonel Marlon Davis was no longer just about one police incident. It had become something much bigger. Marlon sat in his office, looking over old files. Some of those files were from his past missions. Secret operations nobody knew about. He sighed deeply. Then, his phone rang. It was an old friend from the military. We need to talk, the voice said quietly. Something about your past is about to come out. People want to use it against you. Marlon's heart sank. He knew the truth could hurt his family, and especially Tyrell. But he also knew hiding it would be worse. He made a decision. At a public event that evening, Marlon stood on stage. The crowd was large, reporters, city leaders, and many people who wanted answers. Marlon spoke clearly and honestly. Yes, I have a past. I served in dangerous missions overseas. Yes, Some of those missions involved actions that were tough, but necessary. I did what I had to do to protect my country and my family. He paused, looking out at the crowd. But I am here today not just as a soldier, but as a proud uncle. My nephew was treated unfairly. No child should be judged by the color of their skin or by fear. We must change how we see each other. The crowd was silent at first. Then slowly applause began. Tyrell stood nearby, tears in his eyes. He knew his uncle's honesty would inspire many, but not everyone clapped. Some people whispered behind closed doors. Some planned to fight back. Still, Marlon and Tyrell were ready. Because the truth, no matter how hard, was the only way forward. After Marlon's speech, the city felt different. People talked more openly about fairness, respect, and the problems that many young black teens faced every day. Tyrell and his uncle became symbols of hope. But with hope came challenges. Some police officers felt angry. They didn't want to admit mistakes. Some leaders said the story was being used to make them look bad. Marlon knew this fight would not be easy. He met with community leaders, teachers, and parents. Together, they planned ways to teach respect and understanding between police and young people. Tyrell joined too. He spoke at schools about his experience. He told other teens, "You are important. Your voice matters." At the same time, Marlon worked with the police department to start new training programs. Programs to teach officers how to handle situations without fear or violence. One evening, while Marlon and Tyrell were preparing for a big community meeting, they received a call. "Someone wants to talk," the voice said, "about what happened that day." Marlon and Tyrell exchanged a look. This could be the moment to bring real change. At the meeting, a young officer stepped forward. He spoke honestly. "I'm sorry for what happened to Tyrell. I want to do better. We want to do better." The room filled with quiet hope. Tyrell smiled. For the first time, he felt that maybe things could change. Marlon put a hand on his nephew's shoulder. "Together, we are stronger." And in that strength, a new fight for justice began, not with anger, but with courage and unity. Days passed, but the tension in the city did not fade. Some people still feared change. Others hoped for it. Tyrell felt this every day. Sometimes he woke up worried. Would the police come after him again? Would he ever feel safe? One afternoon, Marlon took Tyrell to a quiet park. The sun was warm, but the air was heavy with unspoken worries. "Marlon," Tyrell said softly, "I'm scared. What if this fight makes things worse?" Marlon looked at his nephew, eyes steady and kind. "Fear is natural, Tyrell. It means you care. But courage is not the absence of fear. It is standing up even when you are afraid." That day, Marlon shared stories from his past missions. Times when he faced danger, but chose to protect, not to hurt. He told Tyrell that courage sometimes comes in small actions, like speaking up and standing strong. Meanwhile, the community meetings grew. People began to share their stories, their fears, and their hopes. Police officers and teens talked openly. Walls of mistrust started to crack. One evening, at a big city event, Marlon stood on stage with Tyrell by his side. They looked out at hundreds of faces, people ready for change. Marlon spoke with a powerful voice. "This is not just about one day or one boy. This is about all of us. When fear meets courage, change is possible. We must keep going." The crowd cheered. Tyrell felt a new strength inside him. The fear was still there, but now courage was louder. The fight was far from over. But the turning point had come.